Hello! So today we're going to look at a very interesting game and a bit of a crazy game actually the first time you look at it. And but it's not from the human world actually. It's from the engine world. And engines nowadays have been becoming increasingly popular. Currently the Lila versus Stockfish TCEC match is being played, and they're on the 95th game at the time of recording this video. And Komodo and Houdini also have been in the public limelight, so to say, for quite some time. And of course Alpha Zero, who is basically the father of Lila, you could say, has been also well, it hasn't been, but it took the world of chess by surprise, basically. Just some neural net being cooked up in a lab somewhere suddenly became the strongest neural net, while previously the strongest neural nets were like 2400 rated engines. Anyway, these kind of 2400 rated engines are interesting though, because they show just the creative potential of humans. Like, not everyone starts off as a Stockfish programmer, right? You have to start off somewhere. And actually there's a lot of development for weaker engines, not the top dogs, not the top machines, not the top gears. Okay, I won't make that joke again. So there is development for these kind of engines, and on the computer chess rating list you can find many of these engines. And one particular engine I liked, just for the name of course, because I'm a biologist, is Amoeba. This is a very cool engine, and it's also open source. So we're on Lichess. We have to support open source. Actually, the underlying philosophy of Lichess basically means you don't have to do anything, but that's a topic we won't delve into in this video. And Tornado, which an engine which also has a very cool name, rated at 2800, so a bit stronger than Magnus Carlsen. Actually, wait, no. After the Tata Steel, Magnus Carlsen overtook Tornado. So you could say Magnus Carlsen is stronger than a Tornado. And Amoeba rated at 2923. Okay, and speaking of Carlsen, the opening in this game is actually an opening that was featured quite a bit in the World Championship match, and Carlsen has been playing it ever since. It's a new addition to his repertoire, so to say. And actually it's an opening that's been played by many world champions before Carlsen. Okay, so e4 c5, you can see here that on Lichess they introduced the opening, which is very cool when you input the moves. So this is the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, knight c6. Knight c6 is basically an invitation to the Sveshnikov, and that's exactly what we have here. So d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5 is the Sveshnikov, also known as the Lasker Pelican variation. Lasker, what a genius. And the main line of this opening is knight db5, and after d6, d6 is basically forced. This is the main line of this variation because the knight critically attacks d6, and also this d5 square is highlighted in this opening variation. But after knight f3, which is known as the retreat variation, as you can see here, this isn't considered to be best theoretically. It basically equalizes for black. It could be fine if you want to avoid the monstrous amount of theory that's present after knight db5, because I'm a Sveshnikov player myself, and there's a lot of theory on the Sveshnikov. So you could play knight f3, but after bishop b4, which was not played in the game actually, in the game d6 was played, and yeah, that's a bit weaker. I mean, why would you want to block in the bishop like that? I guess the Tornado wasn't being very windy. Okay, yeah, that joke was lost. Okay, so bishop b4, you critically, you pin the knight, you pin this knight, so you're attacking this pawn now because the knight here is pinned. So bishop c4, this kind of ignores the pin on the knight, because after knight takes, queen d5, knight d6 and bishop b3, you are down a pawn, yes, but you have a lot of activity. Still though, this position is only equal, so white shouldn't really want to go for these positions. That's why you go knight db5 here. But again, if you want to avoid all the theory, knight f3 is an option. So bishop c4, castles, castles, takes, takes, knight takes e4, and bishop a3 attacking this rook. So knight takes c3 wouldn't be possible because of something like queen e1. d6, rook e1. Here, of course, taking... well, let's see here. Doesn't it get the knight trapped? No, actually, the knight might be able to escape, but still, it's not recommended to take this pawn because you lose d6, the d6 point. So knight g5 takes, but you lose d6 anyway. And, I mean, this is just an equalish position, it's not much. So d6 was played in the game, and now bishop e3. Bishop c4 is probably more correct, because now the battle is on d5. So bishop e3 is kind of misdirected, because the bishop might go to g5. And now is the time to make a very important point in the Sveshnikov. And you'll see here that actually, like 5 moves later, black is strategically lost. And this is a very strong claim for me to make, but I'll have to explain it and defend it correctly. Okay, so let's forget about bishop e3 for a second. So the whole battle in this opening is over the d5 square. Okay? And so it's over the d5 square, so it's all about which pieces can control d5. So if we could imagine a situation where only the d5 knight remains, and there's a bishop, only the dark squared bishop for black remains, this is the dream scenario for the Sveshnikov for white. It's to have this kind of minor piece endgame where you have the knight, a good knight on d5 versus a bad bishop on e7. This is the dream for white. And actually in this game we see that while Amoeba isn't able to exactly achieve this dream, it gets really close. So what do I mean by that? So if we consider that this is the dream scenario, there's actually a second dream scenario. And the second dream scenario is to have these bishops plus this good knight on d5 and this bad bishop on e7. And this is exactly what happens in the game. So what Amoeba needs to do here is to take this bishop and this knight and trade them for these two pieces. And guess what? Tornado, even though it's only 3 points lower rated than Magnus Carlsen, well, actually, this is a side note. This is if you go by the CCRL ratings. But if you put Magnus in the engine pool, his rating would probably be something like 2500. So, yeah. Okay, anyway. So, even though Tornado is a strong engine, it doesn't really appreciate this flavor of the opening. And actually, probably Stockfish at lower depths could be tricked into going for a line like this. So anyway, let's see how the game progressed, and you'll see what I mean. So bishop e7, okay, you have to develop, you have to castle. Bishop c4, very good move, controlling d5, okay? Just like the overarching theme in this opening is d5. It's all there is in this opening. So a move like bishop d3 would be very, very bad. Even though it's equalizing, I mean slightly equalizing, it may be a bit better for black already. But it's wrong because you're equalizing. So d5 is the thematic move. Usually it's said in the Sicilian that if black gets d5 in, the position is equal, or black equalizes. So this is exactly what happens here. And yeah, this position is equal. Now bishop c4, and actually maybe slightly better for black. So bishop c4 controlling d5, castles, queen d2. A very nice move. This prepares maybe long castles. And actually, as you can see already here, this is what happens in the game. a3 is an interesting option to maintain this diagonal for the bishop. But after bishop e6, bishop a2, rook c8, I don't really see white's edge in this position. Again, because he played knight f3. So castles, queen d2, preparing perhaps long castles. And If ever knight a5 in this position, probably you have to retreat, but bishop d5 might be an option, also cementing a piece on d5, and even bishop b5 is an option. Okay, actually even bishop e2 might be an option, because you still have this control over d5. Okay, so queen d2, knight g4. Now this is where Tornado starts going wrong, because the Sveshnikov is an opening where the bishop pair you don't need to worry about it. Well, of course you need to, but I mean here going for the bishop pair is completely wrong. Because remember the scenario we talked about. Do we care about this dark squared bishop in our optimal scenario for white? No, we don't. But do we care for black's knights? Yes, we do. The less black knights are there on the less black excuse me. The less black knights there are on the board, the more powerful white's control over d5 is. So if we could trade these two pieces for these two pieces, as I said, we're basically almost strategically winning. And if we could also trade these two further and remain with these pieces versus this piece versus this piece, then we're doing quite alright too. Okay, so quite alright, actually we're basically winning. Okay, so let's say white goes for bishop g5, which is actually not that good, because as I said, you want black to trade on e3. So going for this line, this leads to an equal position, I guess, for white. Not that taking on b2, there's rook a b1, of course. But while this does lead to like an equal position, this isn't the best that white could do. What white could do is castles. Okay, now probably castles short is better, but I mean Amoeba is just crazy. Amoeba is crazy. Okay, so knight takes e3, queen takes e3. Actually, taking with a pawn is an option. Yes, you do get double pawns, but you open up the f file and you control d4. But actually what Amoeba went for encouraged the next move, which is horrible, knight d4. Now we're approaching our dream scenario. So yeah, this is the dream scenario we want, and if black isn't careful, well, actually now he's almost lost, but you get what I'm saying. So bishop e6 should have been tried, controlling d5. So again, the whole idea of the opening is d5. Knight d5, king b1, and knight a5, trying to move this bishop from the diagonal. Bishop e2, knight c4, takes. Actually, we get back into the position that we want to avoid. So actually here, instead of knight c4, a6 should be tried, and after h4, probably something like rook c5 is alright. Actually no, rook c5 runs into b4. Maybe b5 here in this position, but don't trade the knight for this bishop, that's very crucial. So knight d4, king b1, a standard prophylactic move. Note that knight takes d4, there's bishop g5 winning the queen. And knight d5 is also an option, immediately getting the knight to d5, but I prefer actually king b1, because it's a prophylactic move that needs to be played anyway. Almost always when you castle long you go to b1, so yeah. Knight takes f3, queen takes f3. Actually, if I were Tornado, I would admit my mistake and go back to c6. But because now white is threatening to take here, so it felt compelled to capture. And after queen takes, we're in this optimal position. We have these pieces versus these pieces. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Delete from here. Actually, g takes was an interesting option, going for rook g1. But there's really no need to ruin the structure like this, and especially with an intact structure like after queen takes f3, you have more options to go for different kinds of pawn storms on the king side. While after g takes f3, you're kind of just locked into going f4 or h4, h5, h6. You don't have that many options. Again, I didn't mean to do that. And something else I should note is that bishop f6 is met by knight d5, and bishop f4 also bishop g4 also knight d5. Note that here we have to go for this, and if knight takes b3, queen takes b3, and this is almost again the optimal position we want. Actually here it might be slightly better than the one with the knight versus bishop and bishop versus bishop. Here we have the knight versus bishop and knight versus bishop. This might be slightly better even, because you can maneuver two knights to go to d5. Queen takes f3, bishop e6, okay, attacking d5, and now knight d5, exclam. Do I need to add the exclam here? Yeah. So knight d5, and now the whole idea, of course, just for anyone who's not familiar with the strategy in this position, you never take with the pawn here. I'm not even going to put it on in the study, because taking with the pawn, no, we just do not do that. So the point is to always have this kind of structure, and this dark squared bishop is basically that, always having to defend this pawn, and if it's not defending this pawn, it has no activity here. It might get some activity here, but still d6 needs to be tended for, and these pieces, these really heavy pieces worth 5 and 9 points and the standard value system, they don't like defending one silly pawn. And if this pawn falls, the whole position collapses. So actually there could be an argument for rook takes here and tripling up. But probably bishop takes. I have to take with the bishop. So knight d5, rook c8, attacking the bishop and getting a piece developed and getting a piece attacked. I mean supporting black's queenside attack. And note something here in this position. While this is the battle we have over here, it's a minor piece battle, it's all over d5, and this structure, white and black are still castled on opposite wings. So if black could checkmate white, the strategic concept just goes out of the window. So queen b3 here was played. There might be some argument for queen d3, the move that Stockfish prefers, but actually I like what Amoeba played more, at least as a human being. Bishop g5. Now this is what I was saying. You get the bishop here, and this is a standard maneuver in the Sveshnikov, because you have to get it active somewhere. You can't play with this dead piece. But as we will see, it'll be quite a liability soon. h4, bishop h6, and bishop e2 is a very nice line. Intending to go g4, g5, killing the bishop, trapping it. So queen d7, g4. Note that if takes, what do we have? Takes, then takes, and knight e7 check, picking up the rook here. So bishop f4, and this position maybe g5, maybe rook g1. Rook g1 just to push g5, h5, g6, g5, h5, g6, and I mean this is still a game, but yeah, my point is that black is strategically lost, but it's not like he's technically lost. So you might be strategically lost, but there's like this minute kind of defense that a perfect chess engine would find. But the thing is, not only are humans not perfect, even engines aren't perfect. And you see that Tornado, while it held the position for quite a while, it eventually succumbed to this very nice technical task that Amoeba put forth. So king h8, probably rook c5 is a better move, intending queen d7 and rook c8. So again, when you're strategically lost, oh by the way, after bishop g5, Amoeba played g3, which is a very nice move, going for h4. But h4 immediately was probably better. Anyway, when you're strategically lost, try to destroy your opponent on the king side, right? So rook c5 would have been a step in that direction. King h8, rook hf1, bishop h3. Yeah, king h8, rook h f1. So rook h f1 prepares f4, and it kind of provokes black into playing bishop h3. It's not like bishop h3 is a bad move. So bishop h3, the rook now goes to e1, bishop e6 back. Again, like in this position, maybe rook c5, but no, you have this pawn might be a liability, even though here, like, it gets quite dangerous. Of course, you don't want to just take pawns, but here it might be justified because this bishop is far off from the attack. That was a very bad arrow. Far off from the attack, like here. Yeah, so bishop e6 back, and now maybe rook c5 is an option. h4, bishop h6. Again, this h4 idea. I don't see why g3 was necessary back here. Probably h4 immediately, but okay. g3. Bishop e7 runs into queen b7. Here again, you can't take this pawn. Yeah, we're it's an opposite castle type of situation, but still, it's not like there's that big of an attack for black. And after something like rook takes c4, you can take here, and if bishop takes c4, you probably just take the bishop. There is also an argument for something like bishop b3, because you can make use of the open h file. Okay, so h4, bishop h6, bishop d3, and it's this series of moves, queen d7, sort of preparing rook c5 and rook c8. Bishop b5, attacking the queen yet again, queen d8, and bishop f1. Yeah, this series of moves by Amoeba I actually didn't like at all. Here you should go to e2 to again prepare this idea we talked about before. So if black moves out of the way, rook f1, c5, queen c5, g4, bishop f4, c3, a3, and then you double up on this d file, or even try to trade queens, and you have an advantageous position here. Now bishop f1 has a faulty idea in mind, because after queen a5, by the way, in this line bishop e2, yeah, black might not go for queen a5, but if the queen remains on this diagonal, so the argument here is that if he goes like, let's say, I don't know, b6 or a6, let's say, or a5, the argument is that yeah, you can't push g4 because there might be queen takes h4. But here you could prepare g4 with something like this, and then g4, g5. Okay, so bishop f1, queen a5. Queen a5 is a good move because it again puts pressure on the queen side. So if this knight moves and this queen moves, there's actually a very big problem here. So the faulty idea by Amoeba was bishop g2. Now I do not like this at all. The bishop needs to be on e2 where it supports g4, g5. Bishop g2, while it does support the d5 square through an X-ray defense, this is an X-ray defense. Usually there's the X-ray tactic, which is a bit of a rare tactic actually. But here in Fianchetto structures, there's the X-ray defense. So even though this defends, this is all it does, it defends. This isn't a very aggressive plan. So I don't like this at all. Rook c5 and c3. Again, there might be an argument for queen d3. But I don't like this at all. This kind of position is basically equal. And also after b5, b5 actually doesn't work here because of b4, forking. But yeah, queen d3 might be better than what was played in the game. Because as you will notice, okay, so c3, c3 actually is a bad move because it allows b5. And now, black's plan is queen d8, a5, and just storm white on the queen side. And at this point, black is actually better. So if you have to go like rook f1, preparing f4. Yeah, so this isn't that good. because again this queen d8, a5, and a4, b4, rook a8, rook b8, rook c8. These kind of moves are very annoying for white to face. But what queen d3 does earlier, there's no b5 because now you have b4. So instead of c3, probably queen d3 was a better move. But anyway, c3 was played, and here of course if we take everything, this is just a drawn position. So c3 is bad on both counts, but because it allows a win with b5 and it allows a draw with bishop takes d5. But actually queen d3 doesn't avoid this kind of draw with bishop takes d5. Well, it kind of does because there's still some tension in this position, but this is most likely a draw as well. Anyway, it's all the fault of bishop g2. This kind of maneuvering was bad by Amoeba. But Tornado also makes another mistake going for f5. This is a bad move because b5 would just lead to a very advantageous position. So f5, e takes f5. Queen c2 was also an option, but he takes f5 is fine. Bishop takes f5 check, bishop e4. I like this move more than king a1 because after this kind of stuff, yeah, you sack an exchange, of course, here. It might be weird at first, but this is a very common idea in the Sveshnikov, especially in these structures where these two rooks don't make that much sense, or don't add that much to the position. Oops. Bishop e4. I like this idea because it prepares f3 and having some sort, like the king side is almost completely blocked for black. So bishop e6, and now we see f3, and now this king side is blocked for black, which is great. If you consider this line with f4, this is a bit of a crazy line, and yeah, this position is probably equal, but I would not recommend playing like this. Rooks d3. This position actually loses for white because of this move. So f3 is the best move probably. And now rook fc8, bringing all the pieces in the to the attack. b5 here isn't so good because of g4, and after bishop f4, trying to avoid g5. There's rook d3, and now we can double up on this pawn. So this position is better for white, and g6 runs into the same problem. As you can see here, white is basically winning because this rook really has nowhere to go. So rook fc8 is a good move because what happens if we go for this rook d3 queen d1 plan, which is basically the only real plan white has. So what happens here is that if we go for this plan, which Amoeba and Tornado went for. So let's also consider, though, before we go for rook d3, what happens if g4. Then there's g6, g5, bishop f8. This is another equal position, but white is pressing, of course. Bishop f4 here actually runs into bishop f5 because of this configuration. So even though rook c8 is a good move, of course I don't intend to do that. Even though rook c8 is a good move, here it has tactical issues because of this diagonal. And again, I did not intend to do that. So rook b5, queen c2, takes, takes, takes. And this position should be somewhat advantageous for white. Though actually I think the winning margin here, the drawing margin is much higher than the winning margin. And g4, there's also a4 as another option. But anyway, Amoeba went for rook d3. And the only problem with rook d3 is that there's the following forcing line coming up. So rook b5, queen d1 is the only move, and rook c5. So now you're basically attacking d5 so many times it can't be defended. And if the knight moves, of course, like let's say knight b4, there's rook takes b4, and there's some problems here. There are some problems here. So after rook c5, you're basically forced to play b4. If you consider a move like g4, we take everything here, and now here actually white is better because he has these two moves. But after rook takes d5, you take with the bishop simply, and now white is simply down a piece. I'm sorry, he's down a piece temporarily, he recovers it, but he gets into a much worse endgame. Probably this is drawn though, but the winning margin for black is probably higher than the drawing margin for white, though there is this weak d6 pawn. Anyway, the objective assessment doesn't really matter much here, because I'd like endgame experts, of course, to chime in whether they think this is a completely winning endgame or a complete, like a theoretically, if a perfect machine were to play. Is this winning for black or is this drawn? I could analyze this, of course, but I already spent way too much time analyzing this game. Maybe I will soon. Anyway, the theoretical value of this endgame doesn't mean much to me, because white shouldn't go for g4 anyway. So he goes for b4, and after queen a3 and c4, so b4 seems like it's a fork. It's winning everything, and the threat here actually is for white to move king a1 and capture one of these pieces. Oops. And there isn't much in the way of useful moves, right? So if you play g6, then I go king a1, and now I'll capture one of these pieces, and black is lost. So queen a3 is played, getting out of this fork, and now c4 is played. So c4 is attacking the rook, of course, and the queen at the same time. So it basically forces rook takes b4 check and the exchange sack coming up. So rook takes b4 check, knight takes b4. Note that a2 is protected, though it's not relevant right now. Queen takes b4 check and rook b3. A very important intermezzo, because I mean if you move here there are some problems again on a2. So rook b3, and now queen a5. Queen takes c4 runs into queen takes d6, and here white is much better. So queen a5 and rook h1. Rook h1 is a bit of a strange move that bears some explanation. But first let's take stock at what happened here. So white sacrificed an exchange, but as compensation he has d6, b7 and very active rooks. And you'll note something, white's king is extremely open, but with this rook on b3 it's actually very difficult for black to be able to make use of this weakness, and in the game actually he couldn't make use of it, or it couldn't. So rook h1 is kind of preparing these ideas with g4, g5, bishop takes c4, and now queen takes d6. This is another exchange sack. Wait, actually I believe what I said was that white sacrificed the exchange. Yeah, did I say that? Yeah, I think I did. What I meant to say was that of course white won the exchange and he has these weaknesses as well, but black has as compensation the bishop pair and a bit of a safe king, you could say. Okay, so queen takes, and now white sacrifices the exchange back, so it would be equal material after bishop takes b3. But the position opens up in his favor because now he gets to make use of this file. So a takes b3, and he's also has the unopposed light square bishop, so there's no more defense on g8. In the game, the bishop went to g8 defending this back rank, and this back rank actually becomes relevant. Okay, so rook d1, of course, activating the rook. Bishop e3. Finally, this bishop gets some scope in this game. h5, aiming to go for maybe g4, g5, or simply actually h6, like f4, h6. So h6 to prevent h6, queen f8, aiming for something like this, though this is not possible right now because of a check. Bishop d4, getting this kind of thing going on, but again this rook on b3 does a marvelous job. And bishop g6, aiming for this move. So you can see that Amoeba is constantly trying to improve the position and constantly on the attack. It's constantly on the prowl. So rook c7, preventing bishop f7 and f4. My bad there, actually I forgot to include the line at this position. So after f4 and e takes f4, there's queen b4, and after the trade white is winning, because without queens on the board this exchange sacrifice by black is fluff. Note of course that you can't take here because of this checkmate. So after f4, rook d7, now white takes because he can't bear with the tension any longer, and now rook c1, aiming to go here. Okay, rook c7, takes. Okay, so it's not clear who this trade favors, but probably it's it was basically forced because the rook was threatening to access c8. And the point in this position, I mean, the way to win this position is quite crafty. It's quite insane. And actually, I'll let you take a look at this work of art slowly at your own pace right now, and then we'll analyze this work of art. Okay. So you can imagine what happened here. And are you starting to imagine correctly? Yes, you are. The Steel King. Yeah, baby. This is what happened. This is Amoeba's brilliant concept. Look at this. Look at this king. Look at how Amoeba won this game. Okay, so let me explain what happened here. Let me explain what a genius Amoeba is. Alright? Bishop c2. Okay, this is the move that prepares this wonderful king march. So what's the point here? Well, you want to get this rook on this file so that we can checkmate black, or we can play bishop f7 and checkmate black. But the problem is, whenever this rook moves, this rook with the tremendous defensive duties, it bears on its shoulders. I guess it has 3 shoulders here, right? If you want to anthropomorphize it. So this rook has the tremendous burden of covering this diagonal. So what does Amoeba think? Well, I'll just move my king off this diagonal. And what safe haven does it choose? g4. A perfect square. With the rook and queen's help, this is what? A good square. It's simply defended. All the key squares where the queen checks are defended. And this bishop could spring to f5 where it defends a queen e6 check. And this is actually what happened in the game. So let's take a look, knowing all of this now, at the game. And see what happened here. So queen a8 is a bit of a waiting move actually. It sort of attacks a7 though. Now look at what happened. Note here that b3 runs into this. Just checkmate. And look at what happened here. Look at this king march. And now finally white gets to g4 where he is completely safe. And again this block here. And note that this square is blocked by the rook. So g6, queen f7, queen c6, and queen e7. And now finally, the final nail in the coffin, queen e4. Now, what's going to happen? We're going to trade queens and win the endgame. Clap for Amoeba. Clap for Amoeba. Clap for this brilliant game by Amoeba. Okay. So, bishop e6. Queen g5 check is the problem. So, queen e4. Queen takes e4. Bishop takes e4. And this is a winning endgame, simply. This endgame, my bad. This endgame is simply winning. So bishop g6, still controlling b1 and perhaps threatening bishop f7. a5, rook a8, a4 takes, and this is easily winning. I don't want to spend too much time analyzing this because, I mean, you just control b1, you attack the pawn, and this bishop has no squares to move to, and this bishop has little squares to move to, so eventually black will run into zugzwang, and this is winning for white. What an amazing game by Amoeba. So we'll take a look at the engine, the stockfish evaluations of this position. Here you can see it was giving 0-0 here with castles, then bishop e6 after queen d2, and actually it recommended knight takes e3 here, which is, I find, a bit disappointing by the fish. But here of course it doesn't recommend knight d4, because that is an insanely bad strategic move. And I won't like discuss every last single evaluation by stockfish here, but just to take a quick look, you can look at these on your own. Okay, the important ones here, of course, bishop g2 stockfish didn't like, and I agree with it. I didn't agree with stockfish's queen d3 move here. Yeah, I like queen b3 better. Okay, and here rook c5 was a bit mistimed. Here of course I agree completely with stockfish's b5 move, which wasn't played by Tornado, unfortunately. And I don't also quite agree with the assessment that this is an equal position here. I like neural nets more in these kinds of positions, because while I do believe that they are equal, neural nets kind of give you like in what direction they're heading, and this is clearly headed in white's direction, like with the win percentage, because the way alpha beta engines evaluate isn't strictly probabilistic. Okay, here it's still giving an equal position, and actually it says that the final mistake was queen e6 check. Sorry, it was queen f7. This is the mistake, because after queen e6 check, white has an edge. But I mean, here it recommends before, but I'm not quite convinced this is an equal position. But before is interesting somewhat, because you still like have the option of blocking the king from coming to g4. So in a sense, Tornado actually helped white get to g4 with these series of moves. Like white's path to g4 wasn't impeded. Had it been impeded, yeah, maybe I agree. It's an equal position. It's drawn probably, yeah. So stockfish could have defended this against Amoeba, I believe, but Tornado wasn't able to really acknowledge how strong king g4 was, and the rest is history. Here already it gives +5 on this position, and actually it should announce mate on him at a much higher depth. Okay, so let me discuss the key concepts we learned in this video. Okay, first of all, a summary. So the d5 square is paramount in the Sveshnikov. It's the most important square. The whole battle revolves around the square. So there is no flavor of the Sveshnikov without the square. And black also must try to keep one knight or two knights on the board if white has a knight that's able to go to d5. In the game, as we saw, black was playing with two bishops versus a knight and a light squared bishop, which is generally a bad idea in the Sveshnikov. And yeah, in some cases, black shouldn't trade this knight for the dark squared bishop, even though it wins the bishop pair, because again, we're approaching this bad strategic thing in the Sveshnikov. And here in this part of the game. It's pretty cool how white was able to defend weak color complexes like the dark square complexes with a rook on b3 or rook on g3 or rook on g6 or rook on b6. These are this is an important pattern to keep in mind. And also the d6 pawn is a weakness in this Sveshnikov. Don't forget that. What else? And you can keep a king in the center when there's only queens on the board and some pieces, because these pieces might be able to offer some help. So this idea by white was able to come to fruition because these pieces were able to defend the king from the queen checks and the bishop checks. Okay, so the key concepts for this video: always look out for d5 in the Sveshnikov. This is, again, there's like on every move you should watch out for d5 when you're playing a game in the Sveshnikov, and have an idea which pieces to trade, which pieces not to trade in the Sveshnikov. This idea is more important in the Sveshnikov than other openings actually. You have to assess what kind of pieces remain on the board and what kind of pieces are going off the board. Again, this is tied with this idea of this knight, good knight versus bad bishop. Try to avoid this position at all costs. Actually, we'll take a look at the game by Topalov, where this this kind of thing happened. This is the game. Okay, so I'm going through this a bit quickly. So this is the main line of the Sveshnikov, as you can see here. So white again remains with this strategic trump. This is the game Topalov versus Lekko. And by the way, if you haven't checked out Lekko's commentary, wow, it's simply amazing. So in this game, actually, Peter doesn't do such a bad job defending this, and actually he's able to remove this weakness on d5 and d6. But eventually he runs into this kind of position, and here actually this using these concepts we learned, like this imbalance, we are able to transform our advantages. Here, with clever and very accurate play, Lekko, who basically played better than Tornado here, was able to trade off these two pieces, but fret not. Sorry, actually, he was able to trade off these pieces, but fret not, for what remained was an opposite colored bishop endgame, but with heavy pieces on the board. So, with heavy pieces on the board, this means that a win might be in sight. And this is exactly what happened in this game. So, actually this should be a draw, but with very precise play by Topalov, this endgame was won. Because again, this bishop is generally garbage in this opening. Okay, so though this game was lost more by Lekko's blunder than Topalov's genius, though Topalov's genius needs to be commended, of course. But Lekko also defended brilliantly, so we saw how black is able to defend as well. And actually, I want to show you a game that really showcases the power of the Sveshnikov, for white I mean. And it's this variation. So here black tries to get the bishop out of the pawn chain. I mean, get it active on this diagonal, as we saw. But I mean, this game by Giri was almost perfection. And it really put the question, look at the pawn sack opening the h file, and it really put the question for this variation. Now look at this brilliant maneuver, rook a2, rook h4, going for the king side. And though you might think white's king is unsafe, it's actually the black king that's unsafe. And just take a look at these marvelous tactics. So knight h4, aiming to go for g6. Black sacrifices the queen, and white of course doesn't recapture because then we take here. So he sacks the rook that's going to be lost for the bishop. Queen takes, check, and now with accurate play this is winning. Of course. Look at this king maneuver, and now the king is safe on the queen side. And this position is simply winning for white. So this really put the question for this line and this opening. It was a very nice way to play by Giri. Alright, so this is for the application novel settings. Now for the fun facts, amoeba actually, well, this is the purest plural. So they might help us solve some NP problems. You can take a look at the paper in the description. And tornadoes are classified, so I'll actually include 2 facts for this video. Tornadoes are classified using the Fujita scale. It goes basically from 0 to 5, with 5 being an insanely destructive tornado and 0 being a relatively minor tornado, though actually when you say it's a tornado, it's going to be quite hectic. So it does quite a bit of damage, this normal E0 tornado, F0 tornado. EF0 is because they updated the Fujita scale. It's not in the US and Canada, they no longer use the pure Fujita scale. They now have the updated version which is called EF0, which is called EF, and it spans from 0 to 5 still. And for the future considerations, first of all, I want to ask you of the theoretical importance of this game. How does this game affect the theoretical standing of the Sveshnikov? And also, why has Carlsen chosen to go for the Sveshnikov nowadays? What has he found in this opening? Why is he switching it up like that? And finally, does P equals NP, or is P different than NP? This is for the computer science guys out there, and those who want to win $1 million in very non-traditional ways. And if you're doing this for $1 million, I have no idea what to say. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you got something out of it. And yeah, check out these lower rated engines. They're awesome. Okay guys, cheers. No. We don't do one cheer, we do multiple cheers.